What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this episode of Home Built Workshop. Have you ever spent any time at some point in your life building or fixing some sort of fence? Maybe it's for cattle, maybe it's for horses, maybe it's for some other form of livestock. If so, I think you're going to enjoy this project. And if you haven't, I hope this project gives you some inspiration because we are doing some leatherworking. I'm going to build a custom leather pouch to hold some items that I like to use when I'm fixing fences. So stick around, check it out. For those of you that may have grown up around some sort of a farm type setting, maybe you lived on a farm, maybe you lived near a farm, maybe you worked on a farm, you will know that farms involve a lot of fencing. And unfortunately, one of the tasks that needs to be done fairly often is mending fence. Now, I used to work on a dairy farm a lot of years ago, and I spent a lot of time fixing and repairing fence. Those cows are always finding a way to knock something down somewhere. And right now, my neighbor has cows out on the pasture. I've been kind of helping out with the fencing, and that involved, again, a lot of mending fences. One tool that is almost invaluable as far as I'm concerned for fixing fences, a pair of these fence pliers. These things are awesome. There are so many tools jammed into this thing, really handy to have. One problem that I have with them though is it's kind of awkwardly shaped, so when you are not using it, you kind of try to shove it in your pocket and the thing is poking you in. I don't know how many back pockets I've torn because this thing ripped it out. Got to come up with a better idea. Easier way to grab the tools that you need to go fix the fence without tearing your jeans. I've picked out a few tools that I believe I could do most of the repairs that need to be done. You don't need a whole lot of stuff for at least the fences that we're working with. I've decided I need a pair of fence pliers. I'm also going to use this pair of snippers. It makes it a little easier to cut. These fence pliers have a cutter built in, but it's not always the greatest. Sometimes you really have to squeeze down. It's probably the biggest drawback to these things is the cutters aren't so great. Everything else are awesome. So I have these pair of snippers and also a hammer. Actually, with just these fence pliers, you can do almost all of the repairs you might need, but the other tools are going to make it a lot easier. We are going to now put together a leather pouch that we can quickly grab that'll hold all these tools and allow us to get out there and fix some fence. I'm going to begin this like I do with most of my leather projects. I'm going to use a cereal box to make somewhat of a rough pattern. There's only a few things that I really want in this pouch. I want it to be pretty slim, not much wider than these fence pliers. I want the other pair of pliers to be in a pouch on the front of it, and then on the very front of that, I want to have a hammer loop. That way it's going to stay fairly compact. Then at the top, I just want a belt clip. I want to be able to clip this on and off. If I need to run out, make a repair, I can just grab this thing, clip it on my belt, clip it on my pocket, whatever it is I'm wearing. I don't want to have to deal with lacing it onto a belt. So really shouldn't be all that hard. The first thing I'm going to do is trace out the fence pliers just to get a general idea of the size. This will help me in laying out everything from there. I'll just kind of roughly mark out where I want the pockets so that I can do some measurements and make some wooden forms from that. So basically my pattern's complete. I know how big I need to cut the pieces for the back. I know where I need to cut the pieces for the first inner pocket, the outer pocket. The only thing I haven't quite established yet is some sort of a hammer loop. It's going to go right there. We'll probably rivet that sucker on right here, have a strip of leather coming out. Should be good. One thing I've discovered when doing leatherworking is that you really can't have your knife sharp enough. I always like to give it a few strops on the leather strop just to make sure it's just as sharp as I can get it. It makes it cut so much easier and a lot cleaner too. And now I can transfer the measurements from the pattern onto the leather and begin cutting the pieces. Now I'm going to measure out and mark the hole location where I need to punch the hole that's going to attach the belt clip to the back panel. Now I'll just install the belt clip. You can see that it's going to be captured in between the two pieces that make up the back panel. and we'll attach it with a double cap rivet. Now I can apply a whole bunch of contact cement to both pieces for the back panel. And after about 5 minutes or so, I can stick these two panels together. I'm going to use a J-roller to make sure it's pressed together really good. And there's our back panel. So just in case you're wondering, the reason that I'm doubling up this leather is because it's really not quite as heavy as I would like for this project. I don't want to run out and try to get new leather. I want to try to use what I have on hand. And this is what I have, so in order to make it just a little bit heavier, that's why I'm doubling it up. It's not 100% necessary, but I feel it's going to make it a lot more durable. And the reason I've got the smooth side on both sides, taking some of your guys' suggestions when I made this little Leatherman pouch. I did the same kind of thing, doubling up the back panel, but I left the soft side to the back, and one of you suggested that I should have done it the other way, and it's nice and finished on both sides. Thanks for that suggestion. That's why I did it this way this time. If you're thinking that this is an awfully long pouch, there's a reason for that, and that's because I don't want to do a shorter pouch and have any of the tools sticking up above the top. That's always an opportunity for those things to jam into your side when you bend over and work on something, and when you're doing something like fixing a fence, you're bending over a lot. I want everything to be behind the leather. I don't want any opportunity for the back of these pliers to dig into your side or something when you're bending over, so that's why it's going to be so long. Right now, what I need to do is start forming the pockets that are going to hold these pliers. And there's our piece we're going to mold to make the pocket for the fence pliers. And to figure out roughly how wide I need to make the piece for these snippers, I'm just going to take a scrap and kind of bend it as tight as I can around the pliers. Make a little pencil mark. I added about a 1/2 inch either side. I won't quite need that much. We'll have a little to trim down, but it's going to give us a little larger piece than we need. Should give us plenty to work with. I've made a couple of molds out of some scrap plywood that are roughly the size of the pliers. To make the molds, I really just took the pliers, traced them out on a piece of plywood, and cut out 2 matching pieces. It's going to get me pretty close to where I need to be. I've made 2 different molds, one for each of the pair of pliers, both using the same method of tracing and then cutting them out. Now we'll just give the pieces of leather a quick dunk in some warm water. This is going to make it nice and pliable so that we can put it in the mold. We'll just let that dry for a little while. While that leather is drying in the mold, I'm going to go back to the back panel, get everything trimmed up nice and flush. So now our leather is dry enough we can remove from the mold, and you can see now how it's a nicely shaped pocket. One thing I want to do before I get rid of these molds is square this up over at the bandsaw. Sometimes it's really hard to get it to stay nice and square. That's why I like to leave it just a little bit long so that I can trim off any crookedness. Sometimes it stretches kind of funny. It's kind of hard to keep it nice and even. Be careful when you're doing that. Don't keep your fingers anywhere close in case this were to somehow grab on the blade. You don't want it to pull your finger in there. So I try to keep my fingers way away so if something does grab, my fingers aren't going to be affected. Might be safer to do this with a knife. Now using a set of dividers set to 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to scribe a line all the way around the outside of both of these pockets. This is going to determine the final size of the pocket, and it's where we're going to trim this material off. Now I'm going to trim the excess material off of those pouches by cutting it right on that scribed line. I'll use the belt grinder to clean up and smooth out those edges. And it seems like there's always hand sanding involved, no matter what the project is. After beveling the edges of the leather, I'm going to use some water to soften the edge so that I can slick it down with this little tool called a slicker. It really just kind of burnishes the edge of the leather and gives it a nice finished look. I'm doing this pocket first because I won't be able to get to it later on. So now it's time to apply the dye to the leather. I'm using one of these little daubers which are meant to apply the dye, but for some reason I'm not as happy with the way the dye came out using this method. I've used rags to apply the dye before in the past and it comes out a lot better. I don't know why that is, maybe it's my technique. Let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts on this. One thing I think I really like about leatherworking is there's a certain order of operations that you always have to keep in mind. I think it's really the same probably even for woodworking and other projects, but maybe it's because I don't do this all the time. It's really front of mind when I'm working on something in leather. And what I'm talking about are things like if I glue this on before treating the edge of this pocket, I'm not going to be able to get to the edge of this pocket ever again, really, because it's going to be attached. But on this larger pocket, this is going to be the edge, so I don't really need to treat this right now because I'm going to need to treat this once it's glued to the rest because it's going to be one larger edge. It's little things like that, and knowing that I need to stitch this on next because I won't be able to get to the back side of this once this pocket's attached. Stuff like that I really like. It's just a little bit different thought process. Again, maybe it's because it's not something I do every single day, but I really like that it's kind of a challenge, something different to think about, and kind of makes me look at things a little bit different. Now I'm going to scribe the location of that center pocket so that I know where I need to apply the contact cement to glue it into place. I think my camera needs more coffee. It can't seem to focus on the job at hand. After letting the contact cement set up, I can glue that pocket into place. I'll use a tack hammer to tap down the seam. This helps promote a really good glue joint. Now I've set my dividers from 1/4 of an inch now to 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to scribe where my stitch lines are going to go. Now using 5mm stitching chisels, I'm going to punch all the holes for stitching on this pocket. And we'll stitch the pocket in place using just a simple saddle stitch. Aha! I'm going to leave the plywood in there for now. It's going to kind of help retain its shape as I'm working on this thing and bending it and twisting it. Probably going to even do the same thing for here. With that pocket stitched into place, now I'm going to work on the back panel. I want to do a little bit of trimming and rounding some of the corners. I'm trying to match the shape on the side to the fence pliers. I think it'll give it a cool look. And the rest of the construction of this is going to be very similar to that first pocket. A little bit of sanding to clean up the edges. Oh, did you see that? I did that with my right hand. Oh! And then we can glue it into place. Do you guys remember that order of operations thing that I was just talking about? I messed it up. I was supposed to rivet on a hammer loop on this outer pocket before I stitched it in place. That didn't happen. So now I gotta figure out how to make this happen while not really being able to get in there. I think I can take this piece of leather, punch my holes for the rivets, and then using this piece of plywood as a backer, just drill the holes and get the rivet installed. I think there's enough room to get the tool down in there to set the rivet. Let's find out. With these two pieces of plywood in here, I might be able to punch this. We're gonna find out. If not, we'll just drill it on the drill press. Man, we got through. I think I got lucky there. I should have enough room to get the rivet setter down in here. It's gonna be a little bit of a wrestling match to kind of get the rivet to go through those holes, but I think we can make it happen. Before I begin that struggle, just need to apply some dye to this hammer loop, and then we'll rivet it in place. To try to get this rivet in place, I'm going to stick it to a piece of double-sided tape. The double-sided tape will hold the rivet in place while I carefully work it down into the pocket until it lines up with the hole. Then I'll very lightly grab it with a pair of vice grips to pull it up off of the tape. Now I'll use that same technique to stick the dye back down in there underneath the rivet. And I'll just do the exact same thing for the second rivet. This is kind of tricky. It's kind of like that game, you know, where you have to like get the body parts out of the little dude there and the buzzer like electrocutes you. It's kind of like that. I love it when a plan comes together. You ever heard that before? The remainder of the assembly process is pretty much going to be the same as what we used to attach the first pocket. I'll trim the front panel to size. We'll sand the edges, bevel the edges with a beveling tool. I'll dye all the areas that haven't been dyed yet. Now we need to do a lot of punching and a lot of stitching. And like all of my other leather projects so far, I'm using red thread. It's kind of become my thing now. And we can't forget the most important part. I'm going to finish this out with a good heavy coat of neat's foot oil. This will help condition and protect the leather. Now we are ready to load this thing up. Slip our fence pliers in. Our snippers, these things are great. This pocket is just a little bit tight. I think that's going to break in over time. There we go. We are ready to run out at a moment's notice and do some fence fixing. This thing came out really cool. It's gonna be so handy. Way better than trying to just shove a pair of fence pliers in your pocket. Definitely worth taking the time to make this pouch. Now, if you don't need a custom fence fixing pouch, that's totally okay. Hopefully this can be some sort of inspiration to build whatever it is that you have been wanting to build. Leather is a great medium to work with. If you haven't done it, I recommend giving it a try. Leatherworking is really one of those things that's really satisfying to see a piece come together. You don't really need a whole lot of expensive tools. Just a few things, some punches, some needles, some thread. Really just a few things, you can make some awesome stuff. Thanks a lot, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and hit that thumbs up. If you didn't like it, hit the thumbs down. That's okay. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you next time. Really? on. Don't ruin it, dude. Whoa, incoming. Leather smells so weird when you sand it. That's a wrap.